Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Was This Atlantis? According to BBC, 1/5 of the Earth's ocean floor is now mapped. And the best place to go for this is Google Earth. I'm not saying Google Earth is perfect, but when you look at this, you can see that they pretty much have a good idea. Now, when you go to places like Cuba, you have some question about what's going on here. That's obviously not correct. It's been blurred out, it's been censored. Something's going on here. We can see the sand at the bottom of the ocean, and then suddenly we get this. And that doesn't make sense. Especially when they give us around these islands, they're trying to make a point that it's just a flat shelf, nothing going on. But we've heard stories, and we'd like to see for ourselves. But it looks like that's all been censored. It's weirdly censored. If you look at the rest of things, it's not like that. You've got real definition. And you've got a real good collection of all the data. I don't really believe Atlantis was the entire Earth, but there was an age when it existed and it had an effect on the entire Earth. Was there an age before that? Was Lemuria much older than Atlantis? Well, what's the oldest things on Earth? I say that this spot and this area has some of the oldest stuff, because this is where the Pangaea continent was torn apart into 3 separate directions. The land we see around this area is millions of years old. Look at that trench line right there. That's aged. You've got a little bit of land left over on this side of it. You've got a little bit of land left over on this side of it. It's stacked up enough that it reached the top of the water. There are a lot of volcanoes on these islands. These volcanoes are very, very old. Do I think that the rise in sea levels is what made these islands uninhabitable? I don't think so. There would have been a greater chance of having the Great Plain of the Atlantis that Plato wrote about somewhere over here where there's no obvious striations. And why do we have no striations here? Because the flooding has created a sedimental floor here that covers up the ancient striations. But you do see the origin points. You see the striations going right towards there. You see a parallel line going right towards here. That's a chunk of bedrock that the continent dragged, didn't release, and it was so big that it actually created this scratch at the bottom of the ocean. Where did these scratches come from? They came from the continental shelves leaving the middle, and those scratches, striations, whatever you call them, they have been there for millions of years. So you would see more recent stuff. I probably would say this line broke first and then later this line. That's my opinion just by looking at it. The reason why is because this line is older and deeper. It's a trench or a ridge. It's more of a ridge. It's got its trenches. This is a trench here, but that's kind of a ridge down here. And it's consistent throughout the whole stretch between the continents. One thing that you do see up there at the 3-way separation point is a little bit of land that could have been something. What we see here is ancient striations that are millions of years old. What made that trench? A big old chunk of bedrock that stuck to the continent that dragged it along, and we can follow that line right over here. On this side we see certain lines that have been dragged. Look at this line, it goes straight over to Cape Verde. Now if I look at this, I think it matches this, and this stretch of ridge or trench looks to me like this stretch of Mauritania. And here we have Senegal and the Cape Verde. You can see its birth area right over here. You can see the coast of Africa. The coast of Africa that exists today is very, very similar to the coast of Africa here, at least in this part, that existed millions and millions of years ago. Cape Verde, like crumbs, I also heard rumors that it was residual from the Great Flood. Perhaps Cape Verde does have its natural volcanics, but I heard that a lot of the mass here came from the floods and the mud that filled this area. Do I say nothing bad has happened, that there are no earthquakes here? Of course not. Mud could not be passed. Do you think that would happen here, or do you think that it would happen in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean? Mud The Atlantic Ocean is like a pool. If something sinks, even if it's got a little bit of closeness to the surface, you're still going to get a large amount of the residue being washed away by our underwater rivers and movement of the ocean. Now we have islands here, and these islands could have been bigger when the water was lower. There probably were islands, but this is very old. These lines are millions of years old, and you can see the outline of Africa. This is Cape Verde's birth point right here. Whatever chunk came from that hole dragged across and became Cape Verde. Maybe I'm wrong about the exact starting point because I'm judging two locations. Also here you can see that there's quite a bit of foundation here. You're not going to say, oh look, it's very clear Atlantis collapsed on top of this. This has been definitely scanned, but when you look up here, you do get a little bit of areas where you don't get a good resolution. For example, this is supposed to be where that underwater pyramid was found. And we do see this point here, so there could be an underwater pyramid there. I personally believe, since it's one of the oldest locations on Earth, that it's a high possibility that there will be some ancient civilization on this set of islands. And I also believe that these islands were higher. But that being said, what Plato described, we don't see it. That's why I'm always poking at the Eye of Africa, because we've got this large plain that's big enough to be exactly what Plato described. We've got the residual canals. We've got all the things that are on the checklist for a location of Atlantis. For people to say it's, oh, not close enough to the ocean. Well, you go up a river for 1 hour and you're there. There was a river here. There was a river right next to the Eye of Africa. So when you say it wasn't close enough, this river was bigger than the Nile. This river at one point in time really separated these two parts of the continent and created a separate island, the island of Atlantis. Now, I'm not saying that this was the only location, but when it comes to concentric circles, we have residual proof. There was water there, there's shorelines there, there's canals, it's all there. So when you look at these plateaus out here, we have seamounts. One is called Plato's Seamount, one is called the Atlantis Seamount. They changed the name to the Atlantic Seamount. You've also got volcanoes right next to it. That's a hard, strong piece of land, but when you measure it, it's only 40 kilometers across. It's not big enough to be anything Plato described. And there's also no residual concentric circles that are also possibly the same. Yes, the Eye of Africa is 4 times larger than the concentric circles Plato wrote about. There's not a lot of signs of ancient civilization, but these canals are ancient, and there are many cities going through here. There's all the variables required. Michael Hubner put this together. It's the evidence for Plato's island, Plato's concentric circles being on Africa, Sus Massa. So these are his different indications. Is located right here, talking about it being right here. Now, do I believe that it was here? Where is the word Sus Massa? There it is, right here. It's a national park. You have a lot of weird photos, a lot of land. I just believe he wasn't looking far enough. And also, where are the concentric circles located? Is he saying they're on the continental shelf? I don't believe that, because I believe this continental line, this continental shore, is pretty much the same as it has been for millions and millions of years. I'm sure there have been some changes. However, I do believe that this would represent the only possibility on land, not on the shelf. Not on the shelf. When we look at this, we see the mountains. These are the Atlas Mountains, and I think that down here is a better choice. And I see an actual scar that represents that choice. There was a river here. People could have easily gone up that river. Susa Massa, the possible location. Well, we can see out here. You can see there was a river there. Yeah, that is the sign that a river came out here. And there might be still a residual river, but not like the days before the flood. Not like 12,000 years ago. You can see other rivers. That looks like some type of an outlet. No. This is the Mediterranean Sea. There was a rumor that the previous I've heard that there are some previous reports and studies that show the Pillars of Hercules were here and people could exit to the Atlantic Ocean through Africa. In my opinion, this is ancient land. This is the original Pillars of Hercules, but I wasn't there. Do we see the level plains Plato wrote about anywhere near Hubner's location? We don't. Do I see any real evidence of Sioux, Masaw Plain being the potential location for what Plato wrote about? Not exactly, but I do believe that land was part of the original kingdom of Atlas. The Atlas Mountains are there. This was part of it, the whole land. However, if you read what Plato wrote, he talks about how the land was cut up. He also talks about a separate island, and I think that the Tamanrasset River, being probably a mile wide, separated those so-called islands. Michael Hubner has indications here, very nicely put. I'm not going to go through the whole paper. Here's one, logistical range. He did a 5,000 kilometer radius area around Athens. So, is both his location and the existing Eye of Africa in that? Yes, it is. Secondly, he talks about a 200 kilometer wide strip along the shoreline. Now, it's not quite in there, but it's so close. I believe the river that existed, which I don't think that Hubner discussed, made it very, very possible. Close to sea, yes. Logistical range, yes. Okay, this is just saying, was it in the Atlantic? And the answer is yes. This was saying it was west of Tyrrhenia in Egypt. According to what Plato wrote, it had to be west of Tyrrhenia in Egypt. Going through the Pillars of Hercules, yes. And by the way, they mentioned Gadiz, so I don't think that this area would have been the Pillars of Hercules, since Gadiz is mentioned. They know where it was. It was here. Cadiz. It's still possible that there were inlets here, but I don't really see it. Again, presence of elephants. We had elephants here. Bones have been found. High mountains. Okay, he got a little stingy here, but the Atlas Mountains are a little bit bigger than that dot right there. And the location that Plato wrote about was south of mountains. So mountains, south. Mountains, south. I say possible. There are also mountains in this area that are 2,000 feet high that are visible from the islands. Also an idea of mountains. Not ancient Asia, not Europe. Okay, again, Africa sticks out like a sore thumb. Britain is also up here. I believe Dodgerland was a definite thing. I just don't really think it's the concentric circles. Now we have this ancient world map on the right showing Libya, Asia, Europe. It's definitely Libya, because they mentioned that it was bigger than Libya. There's nothing bigger than Libya up there. But what is bigger than Libya is the rest of Africa when it's separated by the Tamanrasset River. Resulting indication layer. Combination of masks. Okay, so basically what he's done is he's combined all those masks, and he's saying that this is the only place still showing. This place is a great point because it's within 1,000 miles of my spot.